Hi, so good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this webinar, which is an introduction to CAMHRA Research Fellowships. So I'm Harriet Mossop. I'm Research and Development Officer here at CAMHRA, which is the Centre for Anthropological Mental Health Research in Action. And I'll be hosting this afternoon along with my lovely colleagues, Nikita. So we've got Dr. Nikita Simpson, who is Reader in Anthropology and also co-director of the CAMHRA Centre. And we are also joined by Dr. Brighu Singh, who is a senior lecturer in anthropology and also a senior researcher in the CAMHRA Centre. And with me in the room, if you'd like to wave, Dr. Constanza Torre, who is a CAMHRA Research Fellow. So we'll be sharing her insights with us very shortly about life as a CAMHRA Research Fellow. And also Sophia Lasuko is in the background with Brighu and will be monitoring the chat and dealing with any technical issues as we go through the webinar this afternoon. So you're all very welcome. The agenda for this afternoon, we have roughly an hour. We're planning to spend about 45 minutes talking and then around 15 minutes for questions, Q&A at the end. So Nikita Simpson and Kosti Tara will give us an introduction to CAMHRA and have a quick conversation about life as a CAMHRA Research Fellow. Then Nikita, Brighu and I will introduce you to our CAMHRA Research Fellowship roles, which are open at the moment, starting with the 3-year CAMHRA Research Fellowship and then continuing with the 3-month mini fellowships, which are for grant writing, and then we'll get to the Q&A. So without any further ado, I will hand over to Nikita to introduce us to CAMHRA.
Thanks, Harriet. Thanks so much, and thanks to everybody who's joined us today. I'm Nikita Simpson. I'm a CAMHRA co-director and a reader in anthropology here at SOAS. Harriet, you're controlling the slides, right? So yeah, if you can take. So what is CAMHRA? So CAMHRA is the Centre for Anthropology and Mental Health Research in Action. I guess our primary remit is to use ethnographic research and anthropological thinking to drive really innovative research agendas in mental health, to provide education and training opportunities, and convene new spaces for public engagement. So our goal is really to contribute a distinctively anthropological perspective to a growing global understanding of how societies can understand and respond to mental distress and build effective systems of care. So we have a number of primary questions that we ask as academics and professional colleagues in the centre, including things like what is mental health at the moment, what constitutes evidence in mental health research and policy, what might constitute cultural competence in I guess, decolonial sense? What are the political stakes of being in action? These are all the kinds of questions that we've come together over the last year to try and set out a foundation for solving. Our funding comes from a 5-year investment from the UKRI Research England, the Expanding Excellence in England Fund. And I guess the really interesting and cool thing about the centre is that is core infrastructural funding. So we're set up basically to build a new kind of conversation and a new kind of contribution to research rather than to deliver on any particular output. So that means this is a really exciting place to come and join as a researcher, as a participant, as a student, because I guess our research agenda is growing by the day. We are charting new territory in the place that anthropology has around the table in mental health systems. Can I have the next slide, please? So why is it important for anthropology to have that voice? I guess one thing that we've been thinking about, and maybe Brighu will do come in if you have anything to add here, but is that mental health is a really different thing to what it was even 5 years ago before the pandemic. It occupies a different space within our policy making. Different kinds of research are being done about it. There's new kinds of innovation in mental health care, primarily driven by lived experience movements. And there's a real push to think about how culture and mental health exists both in people's lives, but also in the institutions that serve us. So we bring a distinctive participatory method, a holistic perspective retrospective and comparative, often co-produced theory to thinking about mental health. We think that that really fills a gap that we're noticing, particularly between kind of more quantitative, scientific research around mental health and a growing lived experience movement in us being able to understand the relationships that a person is shaped by, the spaces or institutions that they move through, and the cultural practices that they engage in. So, as I said, this is kind of uncharted territory, but we do build on a really incredible history of anthropological engagement with mental health research in psychiatry, psychology that we're thinking about and also building on, but also reflecting on to think about what the political stakes of are. So, I guess this is a kind of emergent conversation. One of the really exciting things about the centre is that we aim to produce a really permeable space where people might come to the centre from many different backgrounds, whether one might be a healthcare professional, a lived experience advocate, different kinds of researchers who come and spend a bit of time with us, whether you're a PhD researcher, a fellow, a community fellow, or a postdoc, and you bring that kind of experience out. And given this is a postdoc forum, I guess it's our job as a kind of academic community to host the kind of conversations that those people from beyond the academic space are interested in, can learn from, whether that be offering different perspectives on things like race and mental health, or pursuing new research agendas in things like psychedelics and mental health. Harriet, can I have the next slide? I think I've talked to that. Next one, please. So how do we work? I guess what's really interesting about CAMHRA is that we have a range of partners across academic institutions, statutory healthcare, including major NHS trusts, civil society, policy, and a range of service users and people with lived experience. So we're kind of set up to be able to level up the kind of impact or access that anthropological research can have. So I'll just give you a really simple example. Over the last 5 years, I've worked with colleagues at Queen Mary and a SOAS community fellow who's also a psychotherapist to work on housing and mental health in Birmingham. Now, that really began as a really small project where we were working on what are the forms of distress that are generated by encounters with temporary accommodation in our Birmingham Somali community. So I did lots of workshops, ethnographic work, interviews, etc. When I was able to bring that work into CAMHRA, I was able to identify a number of core partners. So, for example, Thrive London, the London Partnership, Mayoral Partnership on Mental Health, the Tavistock NHS Trust, other kind of key peak bodies like Rethink Mental Illness, to kind of understand the kind of impact of that research across a range of stakeholders. So the findings from my work and therefore the kind of stakes, I guess, of that people had in the research were really amplified in a way that they couldn't have been previously. Can I have the next one? I think I can talk a little bit more about this example or others a bit later, but now can I bring in Costanza Torre, our first CAMHRA research fellow who's with us beginning from September for 3 years. Costi, do you want to introduce yourself?
Of course. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Costanza Torre. I just started my position as a CAMHRA Research Fellow, which will run for 3 years this past September. And I previously did my PhD at the London School of Economics and was previously and continue to be an affiliate researcher in the University of Manchester. And my work has been mostly on, I actually have a background in clinical psychology, and I have worked largely on on things that were actually very close to CAMHRA's vision from before CAMHRA even started. And I worked on how displacement and food insecurity shape mental health and forms of distress, largely in East Africa, but in Europe and other contexts as well. So
Thanks,
yeah.
Kirsty. Kirsty, can I start by asking you, why were you interested to join CAMHRA?
Right. So I think for many, well, I got incredibly excited when it was announced that CAMHRA had gotten funding in the first place because it seemed to me for a start a home for research that in some way I was already doing. So I thought that was incredibly exciting to have a place where I could continue this kind of research and to keep being in conversation around how societal structures impact mental health outcomes. Also, what I was really excited about was the inaction component in CAMHRA, and this idea that really is at the core of the center of bringing anthropological knowledge around mental health into the real world, in a way playing the critical friend of institutions and of the NHS and other actors, civil society, and not that the work in this area, but also going a little bit beyond that as well, and making ethnographic insights closer to policy. I thought that was very very novel and very exciting. What I also really wanted to do when I applied, what really pushed me to apply, I think, was that I wanted to have these conversations within an anthropological department. And I think the real advantage of CAMHRA is that it's so well positioned being in the anthropology department at like an institution like SOAS. So you get to have conversations that are disciplinary and interdisciplinary with amazing people that are interested in these themes, whether or not they work on them directly all the time. And I think also when I learned more about the center, what really attracted me coming from working anthropologically, but coming from a different field and having worked with NGOs and other kinds of actors over time, was that CAMHRA really seemed, and it turned out it absolutely is, like a space where I could nurture and grow and expand these networks and partnerships that I started establishing over time. For example, during my time at Manchester, I started a collaboration and partnership with various operational centers of Médecins Sans Frontières in Europe and on the African continent, and it's been wonderful to feel that was entirely embraced while at CAMHRA, and there's a real investment on the kind of networks that early career researchers bring with them. I think that's
Thanks,
a
Kirsty. That's really, really helpful to understand. So maybe would you tell us a little bit about the kind of stream of work that you're leading at CAMHRA? I guess one of the things that's really important to understand, and I think we really, we really realize this working together, you and I think, is just how essential the research fellows are to our research culture. So I guess a normal research fellowship, like from the Leverhulme or the British Academy, it is like an individual project. You might be part of a department as a community, but you don't have a shared intellectual vision necessarily with that department. Your job is to go and work on your own project. I think what's really different about the CAMHRA Research Fellow is that we're building a research agenda together. We're building an institution together, and that is no work of one individual alone. So that means that there's a lot of opportunity to kind of contribute to different projects that are going on in the centre, different intellectual collaborative work around core research questions. But that's kind of balanced with one's own research interests. So maybe you can speak a little bit to how that's worked for you in terms of what you're leading and what you're contributing.
Sure, of course. I think in my case, I feel extremely lucky because let's say, individual research agenda, what I would have pursued through another fellowship elsewhere, had a lot to do with global mental health. And at CAMHRA, I also basically have the chance to contribute to a branch of research that the center wants to pursue on global mental health, and that is fantastic because well, it puts me in very close conversation with everyone at the center on what this might mean. It means that over the past few months, we started asking amazing questions around what does mental health even mean in the global arena when at the time with funding, with the funding landscape has never been so depressing in many ways, but it's pushing us to really start thinking about these questions and what does this mean in practice, especially with marginalized community. How does the reframing of mental health contribute in this kind of landscape, contribute to forms of marginalization that already exist? I think so that's one thing, and through leading this, let's say, field of research within CAMHRA. This is something that grows, as you were saying, Nikita, a minute ago. This develops by the day. So I think it's something that's, it's a great experience to be able to be part of something that's being built. And that means that every possible conversation, every new question matters and shapes the conversation in really meaningful ways. We've just been together to a conference in Cape Town on global mental health that has opened all sorts of questions, and it feels already like conversations are shifting because of that. And the other thing I would say is that it allows us to be in close, like through this work that has to do with CAMHRA, but it's not necessarily my individual research agenda. This allows me to expand networks as well and to be in very close conversation with other partners that are already linked to CAMHRA, and to ask questions that are, again, that have to do with the real life of mental health interventions. How do these develop, and how can anthropology contribute to asking good questions about what does it mean to evaluate impact of an intervention, how these programs need to be designed to be meaningful, how does our definition of mental health need to be re-examined to actually fit with the reality of funding landscapes, of things that actually matter to the people who these interventions are supposed to benefit, and how the impact of this is measured. I think it feels in many ways like an expansion of my own individual project, but one that allows me to feel very supported in the center, if that makes sense.
Thanks, Kosti. Maybe a last short question. I guess the moment that you've joined is a moment where we as a team have really exploded. So year one of our grant last year was all about building the foundations, kind of trying to understand our vision and our strategy. Year two this year has really been about building a research culture. So, we have a seminar on Wednesdays. We have a reading and writing club that Briggle runs on a Tuesday. We have a brown bag lunch where we share more informal methods and concepts. We now have 5 PhD scholars, a range of other different postdocs on different projects, as well as a very healthy and lively MA medical anthropology mental health cohort and EMRA students. So what's the research culture like at SOAS? And I guess this person would be joining next year. Maybe what are your hopes for it moving forward?
Right. I think what anyone who's planning on joining should expect is to really feel like they're a part of a department. And this is something that I particularly treasure. For example, I'm someone that thrives in teamwork, so to speak. So to feel to not necessarily feel like I'm left doing my own thing, but I'm constantly being part of networks and conversation. Like the Reading and Writing Club has been an amazing resource and a form of community building that I've really treasured, for example. I think that I think there's a strong sense of our research culture being built and a real effort to make sure that everyone is aware what other people are doing and interested in. So I think that's really It's quite, I would say it's pretty full on in that sense, more than it would be perhaps with an individual fellowship. But it's got that is, I think, an enormous amount of advantage that all goes towards being a part of a community that's building a research culture and a field, in some ways, a field of research in a new way.
Thanks, Kosti. I think that's really, really clear. I guess joining CAMHRA is not for, it's really for people who want to be part of the research community, and not all projects and not all people, that's not the best fit for everybody, which is not a bad thing. It's just where we're at in our journey.
Yeah.
So I guess it's important to think about that as people apply.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kosti. I'm sure you've really fired everybody up with your enthusiasm, and it's great that you've been able to give us such a flavour of life as a CAMHRA research fellow. Thank you. So we'll go on to talk about the CAMHRA 3-year research fellowship. Nikita, could you introduce that for us?
Sure. So the CAMHRA Research Fellowship, there are 2 CAMHRA Research Fellowships written into our 5-year grant, and really that's the kind of core early career scholar position within our kind of intergenerational ecosystem, including firstly Kosti's and this second role that we're hiring for. It's a 3-year fellowship for which we have funding for that specific 3-year period. So it's not movable beyond those 3 years. Beginning in August 26 and ending in July 2029. Our funding runs on an annual year cycle, so that's why there's a hard stop on July 2029. It is a grade, I don't remember what grade it is, Harriet. Do you remember? I think it's on it's a grade 8, so grade 8 salary, and the deadline for application is the 16th of January. Your expectations, as I alluded to before, are to develop and conduct innovative research in anthropology and mental health, and then to work towards supporting the kind of, I guess, research portfolio and the sustainability of the centre. So when we talk about research portfolio, we mean disseminating research findings through academic and non-academic publications, conferences and seminars. So you'd be expected to basically have a field of research that you are contributing to the centre, and to develop different kinds of outputs, to bring in different kinds of partnerships that might be essential to your work, or to support us in the partnerships that we already have to amplify your research. You would also be part of, as I said, an intergenerational community. So you would be part of education and training for the PhD, MRes and MA students. This is not a significant burden of teaching. It's I don't remember exactly the percentage that we agreed on, but it's more about teaching and education for your own professional development than it is about like holding a huge burden of teaching within the department. So in that sense, it's really geared towards research, which is really important. But with that comes a real obligation that we all have, Briggle, Kosti, myself, other academics, to really work towards securing the sustainability of the centre. So as I said before, we're not a programmatic research grant. We are a infrastructural research grant. And so we don't have key like outputs we have to deliver, but we have a number of KPIs, including key performance indicators, including outputs. So kind of high impact journal articles, books, things like that. So you'd be really expected to work on your book, but also to work on a large funding application. So that might be you working with other colleagues in the centre to put in an application. It might be you being written into interdisciplinary consortium funding, or it might be you working towards the development and application of your own large research grant. So for example, a welcome grant or something like that. CAMHRA also has a significant portfolio of continuing professional development programs, executive education and summer school, and you'd be expected to support in teaching on those, or even developing your own CPD or other kind of course. You'd also be expected to be part of the academic life of CAMHRA, joining our seminars, joining our rotating meetings where we work with the professional team on their particular portfolios of work, and to be part of some of those other kind of organs of research culture that I mentioned earlier.
Great. Thanks, Nikita. Should I go next? Wonderful. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Wonderful to add to the thoughts here. So for me, also being part of CAMHRA as a faculty member has been kind of joining the dots and doing things with others that I thought I was doing just on my own, but then it's like in the course of doing research on mental health from an anthropological perspective, I realized I could actually teach courses for psychiatrists and mental health professionals, and it's been quite interesting to see what those courses look like for people in other parts of the world. And drawing on long-standing insights in a way. This slide says the new field of anthropology and mental health, but actually it's a very old field. So the course I've designed most recently, or a grant, is for anthropology of religion and how to teach insights from anthropology of religion for mental health professionals. And so that draws on a 100-year archive almost. And so for postdoctoral fellows, what we are kind of designing is a structure that would be in place for each of the things that we hope that you would want to do as you kind of grow as an intellectual. So for writing, we have in place a manuscript development editor, a person who will help you develop your articles. As you think of what your next phase of research is, we have the wonderful Harriet, who will help you identify a grant and help you write specifically with that kind of remaining organic and true to what you might have wanted to do, but also reaching out to the language that funders sometimes have. Then we have a kind of, as Nikita and Kosti said, a research culture of a sort that we're trying to build, where we keep up with new research, both through external speakers and through a Tuesday evening writing reading group we have, where we all sit and write together and read either new or older research that's of interest to all of us. So it's a variety of different things that happens within the center. And as a postdoctoral fellow, you would have access to all of that, but also hopefully help us grow by learning what your interests are and seeing the directions that it might take us in. And then, of course, there's all kinds of smaller support, like it's mentioned in the slide, travel funds, seed funding, support with connecting to presses, and kind of establishing your own writing portfolio, but also one step further to wider audiences, not in a general sense of an abstract wider audience, but specific publics, like mental health professionals or peer support workers, or all kinds of people all over the world who might be interested in reading something that is drawn from scholarly insights but reaches out to other fields as well. And so there's also support to develop that kind of writing. And so we look forward to hopefully reading your applications and to welcoming you to CAMHRA. What we're looking for, of course, is some of what Nikita outlined. It is very much grounded in anthropology, and that is, as most of us who are here will know, doesn't necessarily define mental health only in medical terms or biomedical terms. So you need not be working just with either patient or kind of clinical sites of research. You may have come to us with an entirely different understanding of how we would understand either health or illness, and we'd of course be open to that. And like Kosti said at the beginning, what is important about being embedded in SOAS anthropology is that there are a wide variety of people who work on food, migration, a whole lot of topics that kind of bring their body of knowledge to mental health in ways that isn't directly only necessarily clinical research. So we would welcome people from a variety of different vantage points. But within that, of course, training in anthropology is essential, and it is a postdoctoral fellowship, and it is kind of part of an intellectual culture that is based in anthropology. And so we look forward to, within that, widening our horizons of what might constitute our, how we might think about mental health and illness. I'll stop there, maybe, Harriet, and hand over back to you.
Thank you so much for that, Brigu. So just a bit on the process of how to apply for this opportunity. So if you scan the QR code on the screen currently, you will go directly through to the SOAS vacancies portal, and that is the way to apply for the job. That's the only way that you can apply for it. You'll see there's an application form there with everything that you would expect. Please include in your CV all your previous employment, your qualifications, your publications, all the wonderful things that you've done, etc. And you'll also be asked to include a separate supporting statement with details of your previous experience. And this is really your opportunity to explain to us why you think you're the perfect person for this fellowship, for this role. So please do make sure that you submit that supporting statement. It's always a great shame when candidates only submit a CV and don't submit a full supporting statement, because then it's very difficult for us to consider you for the role. The application deadline for this is the 16th of January next year. So we've given you some time, especially over the Christmas and New Year break. So please do take that time to have a look at CAMHRA and think about what you might like to develop within your research portfolio that fits with the vision of CAMHRA that Brigu and Nikita and Costanza have described so beautifully. The process will be that we will do a shortlisting in January, and candidates, we will then reach out to you if you're shortlisted, and we'll ask you to submit a full research proposal in advance of the interview. So it's probably worth doing a little bit of preparation of that in advance, but we'll give you a week or two to come back to us with that. And then interviews will be held in February 2026. So if you have any questions on that, please put them in the chat, and then we'll take all of the questions at the end once we get through. So we're now going to move on to the final section of this webinar, and we'll talk about the CAMHRA mini fellowships. So there are really three different ways of engaging with CAMHRA as a postdoctoral researcher. So there's, of course, our fellowships, which we've just been through. We also have Dr. Kiara Wickraman-Singh, who is with us on a one-year career development fellowship currently. We also, of course, have ongoing research grants, so we will have a number of positions opening up on an ad hoc basis depending on what research projects are funded. So there will be other opportunities coming out in the new year. For those on a couple of projects that are just going live. So if that's of interest to you, do please keep an eye on our website and our LinkedIn page and on the SOAS vacancies page. Those are normally 1 or 2 year posts will be on particular funded projects. But the third way that we also plan to grow and continue to grow our early career researcher and postdoctoral community of researchers at CAMHRA is through specific fellowships with external funding. So I've already been lucky enough to work with some wonderful researchers in developing their applications for British Academy postdocs, for Wellcome funding, for ESRC and AHRC funding this year. And one of the things that we've really realised, and I think this hit home quite personally for me because I'm also a PhD researcher and, you know, thinking about in time developing my own funding applications, is that developing your first major postdoctoral research application yourself is a tremendous amount of work. And a lot of that work is unpaid. So I've been working with people who are doing part-time jobs, maybe doing some teaching, maybe doing other work outside of academia, and simultaneously trying to balance the tremendous amount of intellectual labour that's involved in developing a strong funding application for a fellowship. And this seemed to us to be fundamentally unfair and inequitable because not everyone has the time to do that. So we thought that as this is really a pilot scheme for this year, we are offering 2 mini fellowships where we pay people to develop applications with us. This is because we really recognise that strong applications take time and also mentorship from CAMHRA and, you know, actually a little bit of groundwork and research to develop. And that this leads to structural inequalities in who can and can't afford to develop a strong application, and that really drives inequality in who receives funding. So what we've set up is that we will offer 2 mini fellowships next year. So people will be funded at 3 months on a 2-day-a-week contract. So that's 40% full-time equivalent. And the mini fellowships need to start between the 1st of February and the 1st of May 2026. I think ideally we'd like the two people to start together, but if you apply, let us know when you would be available to start, and we'll discuss that with the successful candidates. But again, it's really critical that these roles are finished by the 31st of July 2026. That's an absolute cut-off for us because of the sequencing of our funding that Nikita explained earlier. So the salary for these is a grade 7. And that will, of course, be prorated for the 2 days a week, 40% FTE, and also it will be for the 3 months of this fixed term contract. Because these are very short-term contracts, candidates do already need to have the right to work in the UK. So unfortunately, we're not able to sponsor visas for this role. So we recognise that that does place some limitations on who can apply for these roles, but that's kind of what we're working with the system that we're working with. So we hope that that's not too much of a limitation. The role for these fellowships. So it'll be very, very focused, and 3 months is not a long time to develop a funding application. So we will already have agreed with you before you join which scheme you will be targeting, or perhaps more than one scheme, but we'll certainly have a top of the list scheme for you to develop. So you will spend your 2 days a week working on developing that application, which might mean doing some literature review. It might mean having some conversations with CAMHRA partners about how they see your research project, and getting some partners on board for your project to really strengthen it and to make sure that you can have a policy impact, recognising the in-action nature of CAMHRA's research. And then to submit that. The application doesn't need to be submitted by the 31st of July 2026, but we would expect it to be submitted fairly soon after that, or according to the annual cycle of the fellowship scheme as relevant. And while you're with us for that 3 months, we would expect, and definitely I hope that you would enjoy participating in the very rich and vibrant CAMHRA research community that Nikita and Brigu and Kosti have just described. You're very welcome to attend the brown bag lunches, our CAMHRA reading club and writing club, so participate in that weekly community, and the seminars which happen weekly on a Wednesday afternoon, and to generally be part of the intellectual life of CAMHRA. We hope that we're a very warm and welcoming place, and we would make you extremely welcome for those 3 months, and on an ongoing basis if that's something that you'd like to stay in contact with. Brigu, perhaps you could say a little bit more about what we'll offer in terms of support for the mini fellows.
Sorry, there was a problem with sound.
No
So I
worries, we're
think,
there.
yes. So I think with the mini fellowships, our aim, like you said, is kind of like a seed, how you develop or grow an idea. So we'd be offering sort of a compressed, but hopefully still generative version of what the postdoctoral fellowship would be. So of course, it's not possible to do in 3 months what one would do in 3 years, but like Harriet said, this genre of the mini fellowship is also meant to signal both that we are interested in helping researchers grow and also actually developing some projects to take them to the next level. And so the same apparatus that works at a slower pace over 3 years is also just sort of on offer for shorter projects, which sometimes with very pointed sort of tasks can actually result in something very big. So in that sense, 3 months is not a short period to develop in a very pointed way, say one article, one grant. And so part of it is that. And second is that many of us will be running projects in which we'll have shorter, like my own project, which I mentioned on anthropology of religion for mental health practitioners, will be advertising for 2 postdoctoral fellows for 1 year each. So the mini fellowship is also part of a wider range of offerings that the center will roll out, which will hopefully attract people as we meet them at a particular phase of anthropological work. And the metaphor I always like here, or the anthropology text I always like here, is Arnold van Gennep's rite of passage, where certain fellowships, you can think of it like a rite of passage, that it carries you from one stage to another. And that's what ritual sometimes is meant to do, and that's what our fellowships are also meant to do. And I see. And what we're looking for here is similar to the postdoctoral fellow, the 3-year fellowship. But in the shorter ones, that would be the 1-year fellowship or the 3-month fellowship. We'd be looking for kind of a more targeted idea, where basically in the 3 years we'd have a luxury of helping someone develop something. While here we'd be looking for a really specific, I want to do X and this is how I'll develop it. I want to write this particular grant and this particular article. So basically similar, but a much more targeted and absolutely specific kind of thing. And same with the 1-year postdoctoral fellowships. We will advertise them with a really specific remit within which we hope you'll still grow in the directions you would have wanted to, but it'll be like a more targeted kind of period of work. Yeah, that's that.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. So just to say, these are the main external funding schemes that we would be targeting. So when you apply online, we'll ask you to specify which scheme you're targeting and to let us know that you're eligible for those. So as anyone who's looked at postdoc funding will know, they all have slightly different eligibility criteria according to the date of your PhD, how many years of postdoctoral research experience you need to have, or the maximum that you can have. Some of them also have residency requirements. So for the Marie Curie, for example, if you were applying to be with us, then you could not already be resident in the UK for more than 12 months before you apply. And some of them have other specific requirements. So do take a look at the funder websites for those, and it would be really helpful to us if when you apply you can really specify. We are open to other suggestions if you come up with something. It does need to be I think a minimum of 2 years fellowship funding, and unfortunately we're not able to support the Leverhulme early career fellowships at the moment just because of their funding structure. So the application process for these, so again, there's a QR code here. So if you scan that, you will go directly through to the SOAS vacancies portal. This is slightly different. We are expecting to make these appointments on the basis of the questionnaire that you'll complete on the website. We're not planning to do interviews for these posts because they're so short. So please do make sure that you fill out the questionnaire. This is really your one chance to let us know about yourself and about the project that you'd like to come and develop with us for external funding at CAMHRA. It's all the usual things, but we will ask you for a provisional project title for the proposed external funding application. So you really need to think ahead and say, how would you be pitching this to Wellcome or to the British Academy? We'll expect you to put an outline of the research project and to explain how that's relevant to CAMHRA's field of the anthropology of mental health. And we do have a very particular anthropological focus. You know, that is our field. The funder and scheme to which you're planning to apply, when you plan to apply, so please check the funding websites. They're all very clear about whether they're annual or more frequent. The skills and experience that you have that will make you suitable for this. And please also let us know the support that you might need from CAMHRA to develop that application. And we'd also be keen to hear about your publications and a brief personal statement to explain why you're applying to us. For this, you have just under 2 weeks. So the application deadline is the 15th of December. I think that's next Friday. So a little bit of time. We don't expect to interview for these posts, as I said earlier, but we may contact you for clarification. So please do make sure that you've got contact details and that you're reachable after the application date. And please check the criteria for the funding schemes carefully and explain this in your application form. So we'll pause for Q&A in a minute. We've come to the end of our talking time, right on schedule. But while you think of your questions, just a bit of general advice, and here I'll open up to Kosti and Brigu as well in case there's anything they'd like to add. Do please take a look at our website and our social media. I think that's a really good place to see what projects we have ongoing, and also to get to know who the researchers of CAMHRA are and what their particular research interests are. You are welcome to reach out to individual researchers who you might be interested in working with as a sponsor or mentor, because a lot of the external schemes for the mini fellowships would require that. But please bear in mind that researchers are very busy and may not always be able to come back to you promptly. So I would encourage you to look at the website and our social media. There's also links to some of our previous lectures. Brigu's wonderful inaugural CAMHRA lecture from April this year, which is a fantastic place exercise to look at really the philosophy and the way that we're thinking about the anthropology of mental health. And please do think carefully about how your research agenda, and as Costi was talking about earlier for the CAMHRA Fellowship, how your way of working really aligns with CAMHRA's vision. If any of you are in London, you're very welcome to join us for our ongoing seminar series, which will reconvene again in early January. The details are on the CAMHRA website. So, Costi, Brigu, anything else you wanted to add before we go to questions?
I just want actually to reiterate, Harriet, something you just said, which is that really I think the LinkedIn and the CAMHRA socials are a really, really good resource because they are really, really wonderfully curated. And I think the content on them gives a really good overview of the general conversations that are happening. And I think I would strategically, I would use them as a way to understand what conversations are going on and also what conversations you think might be missing, what questions you want to try and add with your own project that you might want to propose. Yeah.
Thank you. Great advice. Brigu, anything you wanted to add?
No, I
Good.
think let's turn to questions maybe since.
Okay, perfect. So I'm just going to go through the questions in order then. Thank you for putting these in. So someone has asked, what is the eligibility criteria for the mini fellowship? I think we've been through that since this question was asked. Essentially, you need to have a PhD in either anthropology or something very close to anthropology. And you need to have completed your PhD, so submitted and been through your Viva, and also submitted any necessary revisions, because we don't want that to be sort of hanging over into the mini fellowship period. If there's some sort of academic admin that needs to be done for the actual formal award of your PhD, that's not a big problem for us as long as you would be eligible for the scheme that you want to apply for. So I hope that answers that question.
Should I take the next one?
Yes, please, Brigu.
But we may all have different answers to that one. But
go for it, Brigu. Do you want to read out the question?
Yes. So the question is, does the center position itself as an interdisciplinary institution, or is its focus primarily on anthropology? And so within that, I would say this is something we've given a lot of thought to. Within my own work and teaching, I feel that interdisciplinarity is a very important thing, but it comes primarily from having a home and a base from which you can reach out to other modes of thought, which is not to say that you limit your notion of a base to something very specific, but it is based on a certain genealogy of a history, of a way of thinking, and a way of and set of methods. So rather than claiming a kind of abstract sort of interdisciplinarity, yes, it is a center for anthropology and mental health research and action, which also means that people from other fields can, of course, also kind of come in as researchers, interlocutors, and as running projects if they have a certain grounding in a particular set of methods. So it is open, but with a strong base, I guess, would be the short answer.
That's great. Thank you, Brigu. And Nikita's been doing great work in answering a lot of questions actually in the Q&A. That's fantastic. Is there anything you wanted to maybe draw out some themes for these questions, Nikita? Because I think there's quite a lot about the field there as well, isn't there?
Yeah, sure. I guess, sorry, I had to pop out and back in. So if I repeat what someone else has said, my apologies. But I guess the key question people will have is, can I apply if I'm kind of not really an anthropologist? Like if I have done a PhD in a different discipline, or I do qualitative social science. I guess there is no hard and fast rule. Our kind of primary, like on the job description, you have to have a PhD in anthropology or related discipline. So, for example, I think Costi is a really interesting example. Costi's PhD was in an international development department, but it was deeply anthropological, and Costi is trained in medical anthropology, both from a literature perspective and from a methodological perspective. So the distinction I would draw is if you have done anthropology like courses, training, and used ethnographic methods in your PhD, versus if you have you're a general qualitative social scientist. We also recognize that in some places anthropology is called sociology, or sociology and anthropology don't have the same meaning in many different countries. So it doesn't mean you have to be trained in British anthropology. I think that's a really important distinction we're making here. So if in doubt, I would say either write to Harriet or the hiring manager, whoever the hiring manager is. Harriet, maybe you can clarify, or apply anyway. I mean, I think applications, strong applications are always useful for us to see, because even if it's not for this particular position, there will be, as Harriet said, a range of different kinds of postdocs that we will have in the center with different kinds of methodological skills or different kinds of I guess like tilts to their within the anthropological kind of repertoire of skills or interfaces with other disciplines. So you might not fit one, but you might fit another, and it's helpful for us to have an understanding of your interests and your skills. Brigo, I don't know if you
Yeah. No, I think you
want to
answered
agree.
the
Yeah.
question really well. And for the set of questioners who have invoked sociology, social science, of course, many of us come from other parts of the world or have taught or studied where sometimes the kind of centers or can define themselves either as sociology or as qualitative health sciences, etc. So we are very open to that as well, of course. As long as Nikita answered the questions, you have a grounding in certain questions that are in methods that are of interest to medical anthropology.
Yeah, thank you. No, that's extremely helpful. I think that answers a lot of the questions that have been coming through individually in one fell swoop, which is great. And completely agree with what Nikita said. If you apply, even if you don't get the CAMHRA fellowship or you don't get one of the mini fellowships, still very possible that you could work with us to develop an application for external funding. So we can do that. We won't be able to pay everyone who develops an application with us. We'll do that with the 2 mini fellowships. But if you have the ability to work with us and develop an application, then I'd be more than happy to do that with you, subject to capacity and the other things that we have going on at the centre. So yes, I think we'd be really keen to hear from you. There's a few questions here around the supporting statement. I mean, I think for the supporting statement, this is really your chance to show us how you can write, how clearly you can get across your message. And in the academic world, that's incredibly important. So in a sense, I think it's in your hands a little bit to demonstrate to us how you communicate and to help us get to know you a little bit. What sort of a researcher are you? What really drives you? What motivates you? What excites you about CAMHRA? I think we'd really love to hear some of those things in the supporting statement. I'm just looking at, there's a question about sponsoring visas for the mini fellowships with reference to a particular country. We will not be able to provide any statements of support for these mini fellowships. They're just so short. The admin required for that really just doesn't support it, unfortunately. But as I said earlier, for the CAMHRA fellowship, that will be a sponsored role, so anyone can apply that from any part of the world. And we've had a couple of questions about specific countries, so do feel free to apply for that wherever you are for that 3-year fellowship. I've got a question also about the mini fellowships, which says that applicants must not be employed in a research capacity in any higher education institution during the proposed period of the fellowship. Yes, that's right. So that if you hold a part-time postdoctoral position, if that's a research position, it can get very confusing about who's doing what and when. So I think you would not be eligible to apply for the mini fellowship, unfortunately. And we've got a few other questions, but I think we've covered the general thrust of them. Is there anything else, Nikita or Brigu, that you wanted to pick up on?
Not really. I think it's worth being very clear on 2 points. One is that we are a distinctive we're a distinctively anthropological centre. We're not an interdisciplinary centre. So I think it's worth really thinking about your research career. Do you want to be known as an anthropologist? Do you want to be contributing as an anthropologist to interdisciplinary conversations? Do you want to contribute to anthropology? Because that's the question we'll be asking ourselves as we're assessing candidates. And that's the expectation that we'd apply to for either of these roles. We are here to support anthropology. So if you've kind of done a little bit of anthropology before, but you're not sure, you definitely want to be a public health researcher, then this is probably not the right space for you. I would really recommend going to King's Centre for Society and Mental Health. That's a really kind of much more interdisciplinary conversation, or Edinburgh also have an excellent centre, Copenhagen. Like if that's what you want to be and that's what your future career is, then we're not the place for you. If you want to be an anthropologist and you want to be known and seen in the world as an anthropologist, you want to contribute to anthropological conversations, then we are the place for you. The second point I would make is, if you, as I said before, if we're building an institution, so roles are growing, changing as we go. Our prerogative is evolving, our vision is evolving, but also we're all holding up a really big thing, that is more than the sum of any of our individual parts. So I guess if you want to pursue your own individual project, this is a place where this can be nested, but there will also be expectations on you to contribute and help us hold up that big, wider challenge.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed, Nikita and Brigu and Kosti, and thank you, Sophia, for helping with the technicalities. So yes, just to reiterate the two deadlines. So for the mini fellowships, the 15th of December, and for the CAMHRA fellowship is the 16th of January. If you have any further questions, or if there's anything we haven't answered in this webinar, then please drop us a line at camhra@soas.ac.uk. And we're very much looking forward to seeing your applications and to
Harriet, can I just add one more point? There was a really important question in the chat about, would I apply to a British Academy with CAMHRA as a sponsor or base through the mini fellowship? Yes, this is exactly the point. We would, I guess for us, we are investing in you, supporting you so that you will put in an application with us. Obviously, if things don't work out, there would be no hard feelings or anything, but I guess the expectation would be that we really think about how we can work together to support your next external grant application.
Fantastic. Thank you for